Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. It's a topic that's on everybody's lips at the moment. Later on this week, depending on when, of course, you're looking at it, it is the 27th of March when we're actually broadcasting the programme live. We're going to be discussing Brexit. After Article 50 is triggered, what lies ahead for UK's international trade position? Where's it going to leave us? If you are an entrepreneurship, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business, if you're an SME, if you're a large business, what lies just around the corner? Our guest on today's show is Stuart Miller, Managing Director of Warwick Legal Network. Stuart, lovely to have you with us. Stuart, you've been on the programme a couple of times.
Yep.
We'll be perfectly clear from the onset. Your position was you were a Remainer.
Absolutely a Remainer.
And has your position changed, do you think?
I think we have to move forward to making the best of what is next. The argument about the merits of Brexit, leaving or remaining, I think we're in some senses settled on the 24th of June. We are now undoubtedly, we know in the next 2 days, about to fire the trigger for Brexit. It will become a process that we engage in for 2 years intensively, and in my own view, considerable amount of time after that as well. We'll be feeling the consequences of this for many years to come.
But you're upbeat about it, though, aren't you?
There are things that we could do very well, and there are things that there are risks that we need to mitigate.
The last time you were on the programme, we had our debate, and we were leading up to the actual referendum at the time. Then I think, and we talk about this. We are very good as a nation of talking ourselves down, talking ourselves out. We're very good at looking for all the problems, and I suppose it's just human nature to do that.
Yeah.
Is there a danger that we could find ourselves doing that now? Would it be better if unitedly, as a country, we stood shoulder to shoulder and said, look, we've made the decision.
Yeah.
And the time now is to move forward, because by moving forward in a united manner, we can be bigger, stronger and better.
Yeah, I guess the lawyer's training in me says we're much more likely to be able to achieve that, because I agree in principle it's what we want. We want that kind of solidarity. We want our society to hang together. We want people who had concerns about housing and the future of their kids' education and the natural concerns about where our economy is going and job stability and all of those things. We want those concerns as a society to be held in the front of our mind as we work out what our future in the world is when we're not part of the EU. The debate about whether this was a good decision or a bad decision, I think will always be...
Has that ship sailed?
I think it probably has, although I would expect, as with any big ship, that you'll see it on the horizon for a while yet.
I like it. I know, as we said, you're a Remainer, and I mean, you work very closely with other countries. You have part of your network is across Europe as well. So, is it going to be possible for you to sit on the fence today and to try and give that neutral view, that balanced view, and you do seem to see this with other commentators, that people will hold a perspective, they will hold a view, and they will argue it till the last breath is in their body.
Yeah, I think, again, the lawyer's training says look at part of this in terms of process. Look at what is going to happen next as a result of the provisions of Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, as a result of the arrangements that the EU will be looking for us to negotiate with them, and to allow our sense of the reasons why, the substantive future, the bright new world of Britain being autonomous and able to negotiate its trade deals and its role in the world outside that grouping. to allow the process has to be as clean as possible in order that we don't have confusion, in order that we don't unnecessarily damage job prospects of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of fellow Brits. And in order that we're doing the decent thing as a society.
Conversely, could we not say in the same sentence that we could actually be generating new jobs and giving and growing opportunity?
Yeah, I think you can already begin to see one or two examples of how that.
And we've heard this with Toyota, haven't we?
Yeah, we've heard it with Toyota. We also we were saying just before we came on air that there's a possible example ahead, I think, with the acquisition of Vauxhall Opel by Peugeot, because I think that that acquisition must be motivated by the possibility of European brands, Peugeot, Citroën, British brand Vauxhall, and of course Opel as a European brand, being grown in Southeast Asia, in China, in parts of the world where up until now General Motors hasn't been willing to take those brands. So yes, there are examples on the horizon again of possibly really good opportunities which could create jobs in British factories that are part of the export drive.
Where do you think we are today then? I was going to kind of nearly ask you to finish the programme off and say, looking into your crystal ball, where will we be in 2 years' time? I get the impression that this whole process, regardless of what's been said and what is being pushed out through the press and from the EU and everything, that this process is not going to be finished in 2 years.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they say.
Over a year ago, I wrote an article for the German Chamber of Commerce in the UK about what the process would look like if we voted to leave. And I made a comment in that article that I felt that the 2-year time period set down by Article 50 would barely scratch the surface of the time it takes to come up with a viable set of rules for us to go forward with, having been part of this trading bloc for 43 years. That likelihood seems to me as real as ever. In other words, I think that 2 years won't do it, but can we be a chunk of the way down the road in 2 years? I believe we will be quite a long way down the road in 2 years, but it won't be a done deal.
Where are we today, do you think? I mean, if you had to sum it all up, and I know, once again, I suppose every commentator on the planet at the moment, are we all doing these programmes a little bit too early, I suppose? Should we be talking in 2 months' time where we start to see things happening? This is going to be a slow process to kick off with, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're about to enter into the end of the beginning. The end of the beginning is that part where on Wednesday our government will formally give notice of our intention to leave, and that 2-year time period that everybody talks about in relation to Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, that will start. It'll take about 4 weeks, I think, for the European Commission to come to an arrangement with Parliament in Strasbourg and the heads of government, the Council of Europe, to finalise its terms of reference, its negotiation mandate. So expect towards the end of April, beginning of May, that will be clear that the Commission has sorted out exactly what its terms of reference are. Now, it won't be able to tell us what those are because people don't reveal their hand entirely before they go into the negotiation.
Even though over here, of course, Parliament is, both houses of Parliament are saying that we should be revealing our hand.
Well, there is, that debate is ongoing, and it's part and parcel of the inherent irony that one of the key reasons for leaving the EU is to make our Parliament sovereign and to make the exercise of power more accountable. So there is this inherent irony that that you may find. People will say there is a government which wants to avoid that accountability. I can see both sides of that argument, and I see we're going to have to strike a balance. You're going to have to allow your government to have a certain amount of negotiation discretion, but ultimately that question of whether the deal has to come back for approval, and indeed what nature of that approval will be. Could it be a veto? Could it be
Could it be a
yet to be
veto?
resolved.
Could it be another demand for another referendum? Has that boat sailed? This is going back to the situation that occurred in Ireland.
Sure, I think, yeah, the situation in Ireland. So many observers say, well, they didn't get they had a referendum.
They just kept voting until they got what they wanted,
and so they, if you like, they gerrymandered the outcome until they got what they wanted. I can hardly see us going back to that, but I do think there is a significant question about what the nature of Parliament's authorities should be to accept or reject a deal. And the idea that Parliament would not be able to reject the deal, I think, is pretty much unanswerable.
Doesn't that make a bit of a mockery then? So we've got 2 years of negotiation that could be scuppered at the end.
Yeah, but it's capable of being scuppered on either side. You see, what Britain has done in saying that we will come back to Parliament for some kind of decision, leave off to one side what that decision will be in its substance, but we'll come back to Parliament for a decision. Assuming that it leads to an approval, it then goes, the Commission then has to make sure that all of the approval processes are gone through with Parliament, the EU Parliament. And once it's gone through the EU Parliament, it has to be ratified by 27 member states, because the likelihood is we will have a deal that involves something to say about the future relationship between Britain and the EU. If it's only a deal that relates to the terms of exit, the bill that we pay if we pay something, and the technical consequences of us leaving, as opposed to a future free trade agreement. If it's just the one and not the other, then you don't need the ratification of the member states. But it seems to me much more likely that what we'll end up with is a hybrid deal that involves something looking forward. It'll involve either transitional arrangements for key areas of trade, or it'll involve the full free trade agreement. I think that's less likely.
All right, listen, we're going to come back. Hold the thought for a moment, because there are so many things that will have an influence on this. We've got the Scottish angle, of course, taking place at the moment. That's going on, that's bubbling along in the background, and there's talk as well that Scotland would have an accelerated entry into the EU. That would just, that's just more petrol on a burning fire, isn't it? And then we have the political situation, of course, it's taking place. I mean, I laugh, I chuckle to myself, they call it the ILR chuckle. But what's taking place in America as well is also having an influence, and what is interreacting with what is causing one currency to drop. The situation that occurred between President Trump and also Angela Merkel just recently. I mean, obviously things, he handed her a bill for the defence and NATO, and you think to yourself, things are just a little tricky at the moment, and it's very difficult to separate and identify what is the cause and what reaction is applied to what particular cause. More to come on this programme in just a few moments' time. It's going to be a fascinating insight, and as I said, we are truly, I suppose, Stuart, we are looking into crystal balls, aren't we?
Couldn't be more mystic, Meg, if we tried.
And at the end of the show, we will be giving next week's lottery numbers as well. So it should be a good show. Let's look back at last week's programme. That was a cracking programme as well. It was slightly different. We were talking to Antonio Falco, who Stuart knows, and when we did our debate, in fact, Antonio was the Remainer, and Stuart took the side of the Brexiteer. Oh, no, he didn't. It's the other way around, isn't it? You were the Remainer, and Antonio was the for exit. He came on the programme last week. We were talking about starting your own business. Are you in the right position, the right place at the moment to be starting your own business? What skills do you need to have? If you missed the programme, it was a cracking show. And with so much going on at the moment, do you have the right stuff to go it alone? It was a great show with him. If you did miss the programme, don't forget you can always go to our website and watch the entire show. If you just want a bit of a taste of it, here's just a few of the things that Antonio Falco said on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. My guest on today's programme is Antonio Falco. What are the advantages of starting your own business?
I'm a business consultant, but I specialise in helping companies with sales and business development. When you step out of that corporate environment, that corporate blanket, all of a sudden you are out metaphorically out in the cold on your own, and you're having to do everything yourself. And that, I think, is the biggest shock for anybody starting their own business, because they leave some sort of corporate environment, or they get up one morning and think, well, I have a passion about whatever it is they have a passion about, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. But they forget about the fact that actually they've got to, at some point, get in front of a potential customer that's actually going to buy their product or service. And at some point, you're going to have to ask somebody for money. And that's what the sale is. It's the conversion of your product or service for their money. I thought I was good at what I was doing, which was selling, but what I had to get across is that I could actually help somebody else do that. I could actually help another business do that. I could actually help another business understand. So yes, I think there's a falsehood that says we're in a job, therefore we're secure. And I think most people don't actually want to think about, or do think about, the fact that essentially most of us would be 4 weeks away from potentially losing our jobs. And so, but when you transfer yourself out of that, away from that security blanket, into running your own business, it's at the forefront of your mind. And I think that in business you need an element of persistence, for sure. You need an element of faith in your ability, because you know what, Steve? If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to. That's guaranteed. Why would somebody want to buy my product or service? What is it that's going to entice them to do that? What is it that's going to make them want to give me their money? And I think you have to do is you have to look at that in a very hard-nosed, cold light of day, dispassionate way, and actually ask yourself, what are people likely to ask me? So I learned some marketing. Yes, I taught myself. What is it? How do I present myself to the outside world? And I started off by thinking, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put together an initial brochure. I've still got it in the loft somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I sat down and thought, what do I want to put in this that's going to convey to people that this is somebody worth talking to? And that was what I thought that my marketing material needed to do. What did that little brochure, and it was a DL threefold, what did it need to have on there that was going to allow me the opportunity of saying to somebody, it's worth talking to me? There's lots of exhibitions. I mean, one of my chosen methods of finding potential customers is going to specific exhibitions. There's lots of exhibitions out there where you can go and talk to people, or have a stand there, and just practice talking to people. It's easier now to get your message out there. All you have to do now is make sure that you stand out from the crowd. And you're going to say, well, how do you do that? Well,
how do you do that?
Well, I think you do that by making sure your product and service is honed properly. I keep saying this on my website. I think there's 3 key elements to business, and they are product or service, people, and the numbers. If inside you believe what you're doing is right, and you believe that you can make a difference, then you have to steel yourself in those difficult times and push yourself through. And they're the people that make it, fundamentally. They're the ones that actually keep going when all the odds are against them. Well, thank you very much for watching today, and I hope that you come back and watch again. My name's Antonio Falco. I'm a business consultant. I specialise in helping companies with sales and business development. And if you're looking to start your own business, ask yourself those key critical questions to begin with. Why would somebody buy my product or service? What is it they're going to want to know from me that will help them be confident that when I deliver my product or service, it's going to do what I say it's going to do? So ask yourself that question. 2, make sure that you manage yourself and use your diary. Look at your diary and put things in your diary that will actually make you go and do some activity. Maybe you'll have a marketing morning. Maybe you'll have a morning where you'll go and do some networking. Maybe you'll go to an exhibition one afternoon. But make sure that you don't let yourself off by giving yourself excuses not to do the things that you have to do. I put up a post on LinkedIn recently saying we've all got to do the things that we don't want to do, and the difference is the people that make it do the things that we don't want to do. So understand what you're selling, talk to people, and actually do the things that you need to do. They're the things I would suggest. If you're in sales, do the job. Get on top of what you're doing. Get on top of a real forecast. Don't kid yourself that you've got a potential customer when they're not. And actually ask yourself searching questions. What's my target? What am I trying to do this month? Who am I actually going to get as a customer this month? And then get some help if you need help. The irony is that lots of major corporations call in management consultants all the time to help them. But as small businesses, somehow we think we don't need help. We do.
Antonio Falco there. Fantastic show. If you get an opportunity, do watch the entire programme. By the way, thank you very much to all the people that are downloading on iTunes. A phenomenal number of you are now downloading the programme and taking it with you as you head into work, perhaps maybe on the tube or the train, or maybe when you're up in the plane and you just want to catch up on what's happening in business. Thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to get in contact with us, and by the way, if you'd like a programme just like this one for your organisation, we specialise here at Business Connections Live in internal communications. Predominantly, in fact, a lot of organisations have a real issue when it comes to trying to talk from top to bottom. So you've got your workforce down here, you have your board sitting up here. How do you get that message from here to there without it being diluted, or maybe people just cherry picking bits that apply to them? A programme like this is a really effective way of doing that. If you'd like more details about that, or maybe you feel that you'd be a great guest on the programme, or you feel a programme like this would work for your organisation, then get in contact with us. You can drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. If you want, you can even have a chat with us. We don't mind. Link in with us on LinkedIn for that matter. But if you want to have a chat, you can give us a call on 01784 256 777. Either myself, Steve Hyland, or Linda Bazant would love to talk to you and find out maybe if there is a way that we can help you resolve some of the pain that your organisation has when it comes to communicating with your employee workplace. Then just get in touch with us. Also, don't forget, you can follow our stream of consciousness as well at going to BCL Business TV on the Twitter. They're really getting kicked at the moment as well, aren't they? They're talking about putting together some form of subscription service, so you're going to be paying for it and maybe offering businesses a premium service for using Twitter. That'll work, won't it? Look, I think LinkedIn will be the leader of that, as I think LinkedIn are beginning now to reintroduce some of the things that they've taken away due to the backlash. And the invitation is still open. If anybody at Microsoft, we can do it via Skype. We can do it however you want. You can come and you can sit here. We'd like to come in and just tell us what your plans are for LinkedIn, where you're going with it, what you're doing with it. There are a lot of businesses that rely on it, and you're just screwing them around a little bit at the moment. So if you want to talk to us, there's all the contact details. Don't forget as well, LinkedIn trying to look like Facebook. You can watch us on Facebook Live, facebook.com, and then go to Business Connections Live, and you can watch the programs with Facebook Live stream there as well, and we're getting fantastic results on that as well. So there are all the different ways that you can contact us here at Business Connections Live. But most importantly, please do go to our website, and the website address is businessconnectionslive.com. Over 200 hours of great business advice, and it's very, very diverse. Everything from the likes of discussing Brexit all the way through to technology. I mean, we had Google Glass on, and we had Windows. Was it Windows Glass we had on, or something? I don't know. We had all sorts of different technology on the program. Everything is there: sales, marketing, website design, everything you need to run your business and make it more successful, all on one site, all for free. Over 200 hours at businessconnectionslive.com. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is Stuart Miller. He's the Managing Director of Warwick Legal Network. Just very quickly, Warwick Legal Network in a sentence is
a group of independent commercial law firms who advise mainly small, medium-sized enterprises, so mainly the medium size actually. Across borders, we do trade law in about 30 countries, and we have lawyers based in all of those 30 countries. And we're growing quite fast. We have 4 or 5 more countries in the pipeline.
So it's all good for you then at the moment?
It's a big challenge at the moment.
It's a big opportunity.
And an opportunity.
Opportunity. Okay, let's really get down to the nitty-gritty, the starting positions of the UK and the EU. What do you think the major constraints are going to be? And what do you think the sequence of negotiations are going to be? How are we going to handle all of this? And do we have the people to do it? And do they?
So many questions. I think the first thing is to acknowledge what each side's interests are. It's Britain as a result of the Brexit vote that is looking to change the nature of the relationship. So I think we have to expect in the next year or two to do a lot of the running, to define what kind of relationship we want with the EU in the future and make sure that we have elbow room for whatever the relationships are that we want with the rest of the world. We have to decide which bits of the relationship that we're carrying across, where we want the most stability, and we have to decide those things that we're going to want to change. But we need to understand as a country, before we start getting frustrated about the process, and process is difficult when we're going through it. Anybody who's ever been through a divorce will know that going through that process is tense at times, it's unfathomable at times, you don't know what the other person is thinking.
So is it acrimonious then? How do you think it is? Because there's a certain element of courting has still got to take place.
Sure.
They still want us to be a trading partner because they want to sell things to us, and we want them to be a trading partner.
Yeah, but they have interests and we have interests. Europe, the EU of 27 members, are desperate to avoid contagion. They don't want the fact of the UK leaving at this 60th anniversary that they were celebrating last weekend. They don't want that to result in more people being tempted
But surely
to go.
then, Stuart, if it's so good to be a member of it, they won't want to leave, won't they?
The thing
Just because we didn't like it, didn't suit us.
Yeah.
We're separated by a stretch of water. We culturally, to a certain extent, see ourselves as being slightly different.
Sure. You must be old enough, though, to remember the Kerry Packer cricket series. And when the funding came for changing the format of cricket in Australia and Kerry Packer set up his league, how much angst there was amongst the cricket authorities that the game would never be the same. In fact, it never was the same.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a sense that maybe Test cricket as we had known it would fall apart and all of those things. I think when established members of the team, remember Britain is one of the 4 largest economies within the EU as we stand now. It's one of the, you can argue, 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. We are a net contributor of something like 12% of the EU's budget. The absent and in many Europeans' eyes, Britain is the somewhat transatlantic voice, the voice of a free trade philosophy, a more open market liberal economy. That is a very welcome influence in the EU. They are concerned about losing that voice in their own dynamic, and they are concerned about the impact that has internally. They're worried that other people might be tempted to try to go. So, yeah, contagion is whether we like it or not. It's an issue in their mind. And
so does that mean then that Europe will become slightly unbalanced? It's interesting because one of the questions is, well, who will replace us then as the voice of reason, in inverted commas, but who will replace us within the context of negotiations? The way we approach things, our whole cultural approach is slightly different.
Yeah, there are some countries that share a free market philosophy with the UK and who will particularly miss us. I would point to Ireland and the Netherlands, to some extent to Denmark, although Denmark is perhaps slightly more Scandinavian in its orientation. The northern, there are so many of the northern member states of the EU, particularly who appreciate having the Brits at the table and have done historically. That I think that will be an influence that's missed. I think that we have to also remember that there are other interests on the table. Both sides want to resolve, I think, at an early stage, the question of the rights of residents already in our countries. So EU residents.
Well, there are 2
in
things
UK.
on the table, aren't there? There's that, and there's also what our trade agreement's going to be.
Well, you see, the Article 50 process talks about notice of 2 years being served, and it talks about there being some discussion of the future framework. It uses the word framework. There is going to be a debate what that means. The British government's white paper says we want actually to be negotiating simultaneously the terms of our exit and the free trade agreement that we would love to have in the future with the EU. The EU starting point was a full free trade agreement maybe a bit more than we can chew, and we're not actually required to under the word framework. Framework means we'll establish some outlines, and you do have some internal debate still within the EU about the extent to which they will be willing to negotiate a full free trade agreement with us during this 2-year period. Will they even give the Commission the mandate to do that? It's not 100% certain. I think that if the EU wants Britain to pay the £60 billion, €60 billion,
that will buy us our free trade agreement.
Well, it will buy.
Is that what you think?
I think that it'll be an area of compromise. I think that the Brits want a free trade agreement to be under negotiation at the earliest possible stage in the interests of certainty. And it's clearly a big issue to this government. This government also in the UK has said we'd like that rather than having any transitional arrangements. The Conservative government doesn't like the idea that as we leave in 2 years' time, we would have to accept any areas of ongoing jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice or ongoing contributions into the single market, unless they are to do with our exit bill.
So
I think there has to be some give and take on this.
Do you think the exit bill then would be money well invested to give us the free trade that we're looking for? Because then it's just nothing more than a bribe, isn't it?
I think on one level, 60 billion will come out in the wash over a number of years. It sounds like an enormous sum of money to anybody sensible, but it represents to a very great extent the sense that that Britain's already made some commitments for future expenditure, which is going to be incurred, and we should be prepared to put our hands in our pockets for the expenditure that we're going to have. So I think we'll get some value directly, pound for pound value, if you like, from putting some of that money on the table.
Are we just gesturing at the moment? Is that what's going on? Are we just saying we've got this bag of money, we're not going to give it to you unless you're nice to us, and they're saying unless you give us the bag of money, we're not going to talk to you?
We're trying to work out in the next month or so exactly what the scope of the discussion will be. That's the name of the game in the next 5 or 6 weeks.
Do you think we have the necessary skills within the UK? Do we have the people to actually carry this off? Or is this, I mean, we're saying everybody's going on about 2 years. It ain't going to happen in 2 years, is it? This is going to go on for a generation, isn't it?
I think the economic impact, I think it would be probably common ground on all sides of the Brexit argument that the impact goes forward for generations ahead. I mean, otherwise, why do it?
No, not the impact is what I'm saying. It's not just the impact,
process.
it's just the process going forward.
I think there are going to be, I personally think there are going to be areas that we are closely involved with Europe in terms that will be recognisable as an overhang from our EU membership, and that overhang in certain areas will be visible for a decade to come.
It's going to be a tricky time, isn't it?
It will be a tricky time. This initial jostling for what the negotiation will involve will then break into a discussion about what should be the terms of our relationship going forward. And we have to decide, you asked the question, do we have the resources? I think as a country we have the resources. The question, does our civil service today have the resources? I think undeniably the answer to that is, as we stand, no, not yet. Government created 2 new departments to deal with the issues of Brexit. So we have the Department for International Trade, we have the Department for Exiting the EU, in addition to the long-standing Foreign Office and Departments of Business. Where does that leave us? It leaves them recruiting. I've got a sense from looking online that those departments so far have only advertised a relatively small number of jobs, a handful of senior jobs. So I'm not sure that they are yet engaging in the business of negotiating, of hiring the numbers of trade negotiators that you are going to need for this future activity that we're supposed to have in entering into new trade agreements worldwide.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about trade agreements in just a few moments' time. We're going to talk to or hear from one of your colleagues who was on the programme a little while back. He came on the show, Christian Bajaram. He was talking about hard Brexit. He was with us in January. And Theresa May sets her approach to Brexit negotiations in a speech on the 17th of January, as we all knew. She was at Lancaster House, where she was saying Brexit means Brexit. But that stance will the Prime Minister take on whether the UK remains in the single market and the customs union? I mean, we're going to talk about the customs union in just a moment. It was interesting with Christian, who you know very well, don't you?
Yeah.
You work along. Christian seemed to be quite pragmatic about the whole thing. He was, this is what we're in for. This is what we're going to do. Yeah, we'll make the best of it. And it was Christian was very positive. In fact, interestingly, is he a Brexiteer or is he?
I doubt it. He's a Swede.
He's a Swede. So there you go. So a different perspective. It was a great show, and I think what's nice is that watch this programme, watch the debate that we had as well, and then also watch Christian's programme as well, and you'll get a real cross section, a real diversity of differing views. Christian was actually quite optimistic about where we could be. He too, of course, was looking into the crystal ball as well at the time. But it was a cracking show. Just to give you the key takeaways that we had from that programme, here's Christian Bajaram on Business Connections Live.
So this is Christian Björndrum from EBL Miller Rosenfelk. I'm a partner of the firm of solicitors. I would say keep calm and carry on. I think there's a lot of political discussions at the moment on what will happen in the future. The truth is nobody really knows. There's going to be some time until something actually happens. The Article 50 is going to be triggered by March, the PM has said. After that, we'll probably have a period of 2 years to negotiate a deal. If we don't agree a deal, we'll leave automatically. I think what business should do in the meantime is they should do a bit of due diligence, look into their own business. You have contracts, trademarks, employees, you have tax issues, various issues that you need to look into that could be applicable or could be a opportunity or a threat in the future. And I think it's important to assess what they are today.
Thanks a lot there, that's Christian there. And his name is, I say Bajaram, you say?
Björndrum.
And there we go, because all the umlas and everything
exactly.
above the appropriate. But Christian, a great programme. If you do get an opportunity, do go online and do watch the entire show or download it on iTunes. Just go onto iTunes and find Business Connections Live edition number 166. It came out January the 16th, 2017. All right. You're watching Business Connections Live. We're live here on a Monday. It's great to have your company. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, thank you very much indeed. Do leave a comment under the programme. If you're watching us on YouTube, it's great to have you with us as well. Oh, my word, YouTube going through it and Google at the moment. All sorts of things happening there. That's another programme in its own right. Advertising using social media like YouTube. Anyway, back to the main topic today. Today we are talking about everything to do with Brexit. Article 50 is about to be triggered. It's going to be triggered this week, depending on where you look at it. We're broadcasting this programme on the 27th of March 2017. So we'll all be able to look back in a year's time and go,
really?
You got it really wrong, or you got it really, really right. The big debate is going to be on trade.
Yes.
And how we're going to stand on that. There are free trade agreement with the EU in 2 years. First of all, is any form of trade deal going to be able to be completed? Are we going to be able to get anywhere? Everybody talks about the Canadian trade deal taking 7 years.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to do anything that's going to be of any tangible importance in 24 months?
Well, you can certainly negotiate the terms of a deal. There's if you look at the last 10 trade deals that the EU has entered into as an indicator of what it takes, because this type of trade deal at the end of the day will require not only to be negotiated between the UK and the negotiating team for the EU, let's call them the Commission, knowing that there's also a representative of the Parliament in their team. But then there's going to have to be the ratification process, and I think what you can say is you can negotiate the terms. There's no precedent for an exit from the UK like Britain is planning. But we start from the point where our laws currently, as the UK, comply with EU law as much as any other member states do. So
at any moment we could actually just go, actually it was all just a big game, we're going to stay in.
Yeah, because nothing has changed in the last 9 months in terms of our underlying law, other than we're about to trigger the exit the firing gun, if you like. What lies ahead is this process of disengagement, and where it will go is into a detailed negotiation about our about the areas that concern us. So I think what we will first of all have to deal with what's happening with EU residents in the UK residents in the EU. And we'll have to be prepared, as I mentioned earlier, for the possible trade-off.
Are they going to be used as some form of negotiating tool, do you think? Do you think if you give us this much, then everything's going to be fine? Well,
depending on your point of view, they're either being used as as hostages to the negotiation. If you're politically, if that's your view, or you're saying, well, no, actually, it's time for us to sit down with our European partners and knock this out as an issue and make sure that what we do is reciprocal.
Everybody,
I do believe that it will be one of those issues that we get out of the way at a very early stage. I do think that, and I think that it could well be one of those things that becomes an agreed point of access, and lots of other things can then be negotiated.
I mean, we had the special agreement with ERA, didn't we, for a long time, where there was cross-border access without passport or anything like that. And so that is actually easily done, isn't it? There's a special standard.
Yeah.
But that then does leave us with open borders. And of course, that was one of the criticisms of all of this at the very beginning. That was one of the things that I think a lot of people who voted exit were actually voting for, was the fact that they wanted control over their borders and could allow people in or not.
Well, and the question of open borders in the island of Ireland between the North and the Republic, and the question of the border between Gibraltar and Spain, those are the two hard border issues that the British government will need to tackle with the EU. And I suspect as well that agreeing that those need to be part of the early stage of negotiation will be foremost in the minds of the negotiating teams on both sides. But they're going to want to ensure as well from the EU side, when we get on to the broader issue of free trade, that Britain doesn't end up with a deal that looks anything like as good as if we were remaining in the EU. I think the one thing we need to understand...
See, don't you feel that's just a bit strange, the rhetoric that we have there, in as much as that... Do they want us as customers? Do they want us to be a customer of theirs?
Well...
And you can't imagine that, for instance, if you're walking past a supermarket standing there going, we want all these people to be our customers, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to make it really difficult for you to come into the shop and buy. We're going to do strip searches as you come in through the front. Some people enjoy that, but we're going to just make it very, very difficult for you. For us to trade with you.
Yeah, so we, the UK, have a net trade deficit on goods with the EU, meaning we import more from the EU, and to that
extent... So we are
extent,
great customers.
But
and if I was Donald Trump, I'd be going, we are great customers. They must want our business.
Yes, but we're also net exporters of services to the EU. So we have to... We'll have to bear in mind that there's a yin and a yang about those two areas of our economy. Another way to look at what we export to the UK, to the EU in terms of goods, is that it's 12% of our GDP is represented by exports to the EU. So it's not without consequences to us either. So yeah, you're right, we're a customer and they are customers of ours.
But it just seems that the rhetoric is so negative. It seems to be nearly a punishing rhetoric.
I think,
and we are being told, we hear Jean-Claude Juncker, he keeps... For me, he was one of the... Because I voted out. I went in there thinking I was going to vote Remain. And I thought, let's go to hell in a handcart, and I voted out. And the following morning, I woke up feeling sick in my stomach, thinking, what have I done? However, since then, I've become more and more comfortable with my decision, feeling actually it was the right decision. And he was one of the things, he was one of the reasons, because he was dictatorial in the way, and he still is. We need, if I'm going to be your customer, I want to be charmed ever so slightly. I want to be caressed and loved. I don't feel that with the EU. I feel like I've been told off all the time.
I think that's an impression that many people would say they have. But I could equally say that I don't particularly want this conversation to be about the politics of what we're about, because then we'll just be ending up rehashing the old argument. But I'm not entirely sure that Boris Johnson and David Davis have done a made a massively obvious effort to woo British customers in the EU. They're the rhetoric that says actually leaving and going to a WTO trade arrangement, not having a free trade agreement with the EU, could be better than quite a lot of other outcomes. You can debate whether they're right or wrong, but what you can't deny is it lacks charm.
So both sides, yes, indeed. So both sides then perhaps maybe are at fault. Let's get back to the core question then. A free trade agreement, do you think we will get even close to what we're hoping for, or do you think because they are trying to make certain that it becomes an unattractive proposition to other members of the state, the EU states, so it becomes unattractive for them to even contemplate leaving, that they will make this such an unattractive deal and so difficult to do that nobody else will do it? And surely that's the wrong way of approaching it.
I think that the reality is that 2 years isn't 2 years, because you're going to, for everything to be done in 2 years, you have to go through both the negotiation and the ratification process. To answer your question, I think that is extremely unlikely, for the simple reason that if you allow potentially 6 months for 27 countries to ratify, and you would need probably five months at least, then in reality, you're going to have a draft agreement in place between Britain and the European Commission going forward to the European Parliament by autumn of next year, 2018, in order to be able to ratify through the winter months and be in a position that you'd have a deal. Now, if you look at trade deals that the EU has done in the past and how ratification has gone with that, it's 4.5 months since the trade deal was done with Canada. That's not yet ratified. There are, of the other 9 of the last 10, the oldest one is about 7.5 years old. I'm trying to think who it's with. It took 5 years with South Korea, 7.5 years and still running with South Africa. So, experience suggests that we might be able to agree the terms of the deal. They all have agreed terms of the deal, but they haven't got them ratified yet.
But do you not think that because of what we're doing, we now become that pig in the hole? Really, we're outside of it.
Yeah.
We're another trading body that's outside of the EU that people can trade with and they can build deals with.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden what we're doing is we've just opened another shop up on the high street, haven't we? And so, okay, we've got the big supermarket sitting here, and yes, we are corner store size, but we've got some clout behind us still because we're big enough.
Yeah.
So
I would say British industry needs to apply a lot of pressure now on the government to get recruiting. Because if you're going to have those trade deals with the country, where the shop is going to sell to its new customers, if you're going to, in any sense, replace, if you accept that for so long as there is uncertainty with the EU, there is a risk that we'll have a downturn in trade. I'm not saying 100% switch off the tap. I'm saying, a few percentage points of downturn in trade with the EU for reasons of the uncertainty. If you accept that that's a risk, just as a hypothesis, and you say, well, actually it's by opening the new shop that we create the new markets, and we will mitigate that risk by having more customers over there, and we'll get back to very good relations with our European partners over time. The wounds will heal. Take all of those arguments with a following wind. You still have to beef up the trade with these other countries very rapidly. That means getting the trade deals done, because it's inherent in the Brexit argument that we're going to negotiate new trade deals. And if we're going to negotiate new trade deals, we need to recruit the civil servants. And I'm not seeing.
And that's the
evidence.
crux of it, isn't it?
I do think that's part of it.
We're just not. We just don't seem to have accelerated our recruitment, and we're just not in a position where we've got the teams available to go about to do this.
And sorry to interrupt. We will need to make a decision. The EU has free trade agreements with about 53 other countries around the world. At an early stage, we, the UK, need to decide, are we going to ask to stay part of those arrangements when we've left the EU? Or are we going to go to each of those 53 countries and negotiate new deals? And how long is that going to take? And how many civil servants do we need to man those negotiations if we're going to go down that path? So just bear in mind that we have to make some decisions. And we're not getting any guidance from Westminster as to what the ploy is. Do we want to carry these 53 trade agreements across, or are we going to abandon them? And what does that mean for individual exporters?
Listen, I know you've got a number of points that we just want to get through, and like always, the thing about this is such a big subject. I mean, we've nearly talked an hour.
Wow.
Which is frightening, but even if we have to extend ever so slightly today, we will, to actually get the 10 key points in that we're looking at. I hope you're finding it really interesting, and because the thing is that I think there's a lot of things that have been said. The other thing we haven't touched on is whether you look at these two shops that I've now made up. We've got the European shop. Of course, there are departments in the larger shop which aren't working particularly well. We've got the fish shop, which is run by the Greeks. We've got the Italian shop, which can't find a decent manager to sort that particular franchise out inside the shop. So there's all sorts of issues going on in the big shop at the moment, and we've seen big shops fail. Yeah. And is there? I'll extend this a little bit. Is there not a danger at the moment that the big shop, the way it's been run at the moment, with the different political stances that are taking place, was this disruptive nature that we've seen the other side of the Atlantic, kind of really happening in Europe as well, so that Europe itself becomes weaker and becomes a declining market, and then they're going to be at the moment they don't seem to be hungry for trade deals.
Well, we have the EU is currently negotiating something like at least more than 10 more trade deals currently in play, and the recent success with the Canadian one, which is now in the ratification process.
Why is it so difficult, Stuart? You sit there, you do these negotiations. Yeah. Well, if I've got something that I want to sell you, I can either sell it to you and go, that's the price, do you want to buy it? Or I can sell it, or you'll put some form of input duty on it so that money is made. Well, why is it so difficult to do?
Well, international trade is difficult for reasons that are layered. It's complicated because exchange rates go up and down, and people are buying goods and services in the future. So who's going to take the exchange rate risk? It's complicated by the fact that when you're supplying into another country's marketplace, you've got to abide by their standards. The UK will have to, if we want to export into the single market, then the exporters into the single market, exporters into Japan, exporters into the US have to abide by the local standards that apply in those marketplaces. And there are quite a few countries which protect, which have subtle ways of protecting their trade. The WTO rules and regime is designed to reduce the risk of protectionism by many countries in many areas, but we know that it is difficult. I was recently in India, and there was absolute recognition from the Confederation of Indian Industry, from local chambers of commerce over there, that that whilst India has made great progress in opening up its markets, there are still sectors where it is extremely difficult for foreigners to either to export into India or to be engaged locally with a presence like a factory or a distributor or what have you. There, and that's not the worst of the it's not the most restrictive market in the world. So you have local standards. The EU makes it very difficult for people to import into the EU certain things such as pharmaceuticals. They have to go through EU regulatory approval. At the moment, the UK is inside that regime. We've got it all. In future, how do we make sure that our our industry isn't hampered by the possibility of British standards
All
and
we've got to
European
do
standards
surely
diverging.
is to introduce, is to mirror the regulatory requirements by Europe. If
Which
we
begs-
mirror it and we put it into our law, which we do now anyway, we're already doing it. So,
Yeah, but one of the arguments for leaving is that we don't want to have the jurisdiction of we don't want to be bound by the rulings of the European Court of Justice. When it comes to trade disputes within the EU, within the single market, that's the court that has the jurisdiction. If our trading standards are just going to mirror what the EU does, we get no say. Again, we're going back to the argument that we don't want to have, which is to say, that debate is done. What I will say is, if you flip this over and look at what we're doing in the future, how are we going to regulate this relationship? We do have in the next.
do we cherry pick? Do you think?
Well, that is the EU negotiating team. I think will be hyper aware of that risk, and they will push back on it very hard. I think that will be one of their clearest instructions, is not to allow the Brits to cherry pick, to put it simply. That we're not going to, they're not going to want the perception to arise that we've been able to do that. On the other hand, the British will constantly say, let's look at this as a whole. There are areas where you would really like our cooperation, such as in defence and policing matters, such as in certain areas of technology. If we can give you more, if you can give us more here, well, let's give you more there. So it does then look like an old-fashioned haggle, and we've got to expect at some stage in the next 18 months for the haggle to become, really gritty, and that'll be fine. That's the nature of these things, and a lot of it will go on behind closed doors, and sometimes it will erupt into the public arena.
There'll be probably a lot of slamming doors as well, and people storming out and
Yeah, but I think you come back to that idea that both sides have an interest in maintaining some degree of civility about it, unless the egos of the people at the table get in front.
that could be a serious problem. Listen, hold that thought, because I am desperate. You've got 10 points there that we do need to get through.
Yeah.
We've got through a few of them actually
we have,
just then. Actually, a special extended programme today. We're talking about what's going to be happening later on this week. Article 50 will actually be triggered formally. And we're talking about what lies ahead for the UK's international trade position. What we're hoping for. It's very difficult. I've found actually doing this conversation that you don't go back into the rhetoric of Brexiteering, remaining, whatever. I mean, what we're trying to do here, we're trying to look at as we move forward. What is downstream now? What's the next 2 years going to be holding for us? What are we going to come out of it? What do we need to come out of it to be successful? We are, depending on who you talk to, 5th, 6th largest trading nation in the world. We're one of the cornerstones, or we were up until, is it Thursday? Is it Wednesday or Thursday? Wednesday. Up until Wednesday, we will be, and probably still will be for another 2 years, because it doesn't actually happen then. It's just the beginning of the next bit, isn't it?
Think of it like giving notice to leave your employment. You've given the notice, but you're still working it out. So we'll be in that notice period.
So what's happening right now? Jean-Claude Juncker is giving us our cardboard box, and we are clearing our desk. That is what's taking place over the next 2 years. Listen, I hope you're finding today's programme interesting. My guest on today's show is Stuart Miller. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have you with us. We're live every Monday. As I said, a slightly extended programme. Today we're talking about all things when it comes to Brexit. One of the things we are noticing, though, is the number of you who are enjoying the programme by downloading it on iTunes. Yes, we do get a huge audience on YouTube. We get, yes, a huge audience on Facebook. But the downloads of the podcast is something that is absolutely just running away. And interestingly enough, the audience is a global audience. So we are talking about the UK and America. Surprisingly, China, something like the 3rd largest audience for the programme is China at the moment. They are really interested in what is going on here for obvious reasons. So that's interesting. But then the rest of the world as well comes into that. Now, iTunes is a fantastic vehicle. It means you can take it with you. We prepared the programme specifically for the iTunes, and also the mobile, the tablet and smartphone environment so that the program you download is ideally suited for that. We do all that, especially so we know that a lot of our viewers like to take the program with us. One way you can help us grow the strength, the knowledge, the visibility of the program is by leaving a review. We'd love you to do that. It's dead easy to do. All you got to do is go onto the website and find the iTunes link. View it in iTunes on your PC. This will take you to your account, in fact. You'll see all the programs there, and then click on the ratings and reviews. Now that will then take you to this bit here where you can write a review, say something nice about the program, leave a 5-star review. Just tell us how great Stuart Miller is and how valuable you find his information, and then post that on there. That really helps, because what it means is we'd love to drive the program up to #1 to the top of the iTunes business charts. So if you can help us do that, it'd be a fantastic help. We'd really appreciate it. And don't forget, if you would like to have a program like this one, or you'd like to talk to us about how we could maybe help you with your comms, both internal and external, B2B, B2C, we can do all of that. All you got to do is contact us here at Business Connections Live. I'll give you all the details right now, because I think the last bit of the program is going to be quite long as well. So the email address is studio@businessconnectionslive.com. Just drop us an email there if you want to have a chat with us. If you want, you can also give us a call. We love chatting. 01784 256 777. Follow our stream of consciousness at BCL Business TV. That's easy to do on the Twitter, and don't forget Facebook Live as well. You can see our webpage there, and there's our Twitter. Let's have a look at our Facebook. There it is. There's our Facebook, and you can also go to our website as well at Business Connections Live. Over 200 hours of great business advice and programs from industry experts across the United Kingdom and from the States as well. We had a great show with Gordon Treadgold a couple of weeks back where we Skyped him in. So if you do wish to get involved with us, you want to talk to us, that's the way that you go about doing it. You're watching Business Connections Live. My guest of today's programme is Stuart Miller. He's the Managing Director of Warwick Legal Services, or Legal Network, sorry, not services. You can find their website. We'll just have a quick gander at their website. You've got all sorts of different things going on there. Here's their website. There we go. 41 firms, 55 cities, 535 lawyers. A little bit about what Warwick's all about, what the different dates are that are coming along. But what I find, I mean, this is your typical lawyer kind of website. It's loads of work, but some great information on there as well, and a fantastic blog, very, very readable, really interesting. It just gives you a real feel about that whole European thing that's going on at the moment. If you want to go to their website, it is warwicklegal.com, warwicklegal.com. Go to their website, find out more about Stuart and also his company as well, his organisation, and maybe they too can help you get through this minefield that is about to be taking place, because that's what they specialise in. They're talking about trade agreements, how your T's and C's, all those kind of everything from the minutiae that you need as an organisation, as a business, to make certain that you trade effectively overseas. That's what they do. So just go to their website. That was a good ad. Thank
you very much. Thank you.
There we are.
So checks in the post.
My pleasure. You haven't seen the invoice yet. It's all in the T's and C's. Let's go back. I know you had 10 points, and it's a real danger that it becomes a talking shop, this,
sure,
and we don't get any core facts out.
Yeah.
So you think there are 10 key points that we need to be aware of?
I think if I maybe just repeat, I think we're entering into that period in the next couple of years when the debate will be almost as much about process as the objectives, and we'll keep swinging backwards between those. And anybody who's ever negotiated a commercial agreement of any sort will know that when you're trying to get to a written agreement, at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is do the business. Get the product to market.
We're
get
going
the
for a
services
close.
launched.
Call to action.
But we want to know, what does the agreement say? Mainly because if something goes wrong, if the unexpected happens, where do we stand then? And so agreements are always your fallback for when things don't happen in your best plans. When things are going swimmingly, you have a happy knack of muddling through, and the things that irritate you tend to be subliminated, and the things that you love are the things that you go with. So, but let's not underestimate the importance of getting the arrangements right with the EU, both in terms of our exit terms and what the future trade deal has. The exit terms are less to do with commercial trade than is of interest to this audience, because they will be dealing with things like what happens to civil servants that we've sent to Europe, and will we bring them back? It'll be dealing with pensions. It will be dealing with what happens to the British judges who sit in the European Court of Justice right now. What's going to are they going to have a job in the future? There are a few thousand people affected by that, and there's quite a big pensions bill for the future, which is part of that 60 billion, by the way. And so, we'll have to deal with that. But I think that probably most of the audience thinks, leave that to the people who know the numbers, and it's just a number at the end of the day. When it comes to the future, we could be faced with a wait for that ratification process for the future free trade agreement to come into place. And if we can't get the ratification done within the 2-year period of the Article 50 notice period, do we want to be in a kind of a legal no man's land for a period between when we leave the EU and when the new free trade agreement picks up? No, I won't like it at all, because actually what it will lead to is lots of businesses not making investment decisions that are good for employment and good for growth of the economy, running both ways, by the way. Both into investment into the UK. We've benefited from inward investment, and we pride ourselves on being a great place for international businesses to invest in. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking up stories like Toyota in recent weeks. On the other hand, we want our exporters to have a really good run. We want our exporters to be able to go and establish their brands in other countries.
But it is also in Europeans' interests as well, isn't it?
It is.
Because they don't want that either, because they too want to be selling their products to us.
It is, but one of the things that we're putting on the table as our key demand is that we've got to be able to limit the right of migration of people. It was a big topic of the Brexit debate, and as again most of your viewers will be aware, the EU operates on the basis of something known as the 4 freedoms: the freedom of movement of people, services, capital, and goods. And this freedom of movement of people is one of the friction issues.
When we go back to the original EEC, when we go back to when we had the 6 nations, were they the same fundamental principles?
There wasn't the freedom of movement of capital in those days.
So when did that change? I can't see. I know we're going back to that. But when did that change, and when did we vote for that? How did that happen?
The treaty in the early 90s. Which established the single market, was the treaty that fundamentally opened up the freedom of movement of capital in addition to the other 3 freedoms. So the freedom of movement of people was largely in place.
Because really, what we're after, isn't it? In fact, what we would like is what we had originally, isn't it? That's what would work. The European free trade, the EEC, as I would call it in my childhood.
If I'm interpreting the Brexit side of the debate, yes, I think that's probably that's.
And if we got that, that would work, wouldn't it?
Would it work? Well, yes, it
because it did work.
It certainly was successful enough that people thought that the next stage was going to be interesting to go forward into, including Margaret Thatcher. It can be made to work. Free trade areas, on one level, what the Norwegians have got with the EU is access to the single market without being members of the.
But this is apples and pears. This is like for like, isn't it? Norway is not the United Kingdom.
No,
what's the population of Norway?
It's much smaller. Obviously, that much smaller. It's 8
million, something like that. And we're if you include Scotland for the moment, we're 69 million.
Yes. Yes.
It always seems that we bring this up. Canada, we talk about the Canada trade deal.
Yeah.
And I know we're going back to it, and I promise I'll stop it straight away. But the other side of the Atlantic, it's a vast continent. It's taken 7 years for some. We are in the same high street.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't see. That's why I see this battling between the two shops that sell each other goods in the same high street. It's the difficulty that I see.
Well, yeah, look, I think we will get to some kind of arrangement with the EU, but I think that where we as a country are going to have to give way is in relation to what currently stands in the white paper that the government issued a month or so ago. The white paper says, and Theresa May said in that Lancaster House speech that you referred to, she said that she wanted us to go straight to the free trade agreement and not have transitional arrangements which might run the risk of either the UK remaining in the EU for longer than 2 years with the agreement of the other member states, or where we have transitional arrangements for certain industries. I think that where we will have to give is that it would be chaotic for British business to be finding at the end of March 2019 that we're outside the EU and we're waiting for the free trade agreement to come into place on a wing and a prayer.
Don't you think that is what's going to happen, though?
I sense there is a risk of it. I think that, I think and I hope that sense will prevail on both sides of the negotiation, and that there will be, an understanding that there are certain bits of the EU which it's in our interest to transition from, not try to do everything overnight. I just think it's going to be the only practical way forward.
It is, in all fairness, nearly an impossible. Somebody's just whispered in my ear, it is a mess. I was going to say it's a difficult job, but probably mess is a better description of it, because we've got 27 countries and each one of them can veto or stop it.
Yes, and you saw with the Canada agreement, which was...
It was one area, wasn't it?
Which was relatively, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement was relatively uncontroversial, really, amongst the member states of the EU. But yes, you had that one district of Belgium, which briefly stood out against it, and caused the brief crisis. And there was a subsequent negotiation with them, between them and I believe the Commission. In Brussels. And
do you think we should just tow the British Isles out a little bit further into the Atlantic, sever all ties straight away, and go back to the World Trade Organisation, go back to those agreements and just
I think that's less healthy than making a real effort to have a free trade agreement. Look, on both sides of the argument, the economists and the politicians say that free trade is generally good for employment, and the purpose of us leaving the EU is to promote free trade. It would be deeply ironic if we would go back to WTO rules with our EU partners, given that 47% of our exports go into the EU. We would end up with tariffs ranging from 3 or 4% through to potentially nearly 30% in the agricultural sector. An average tariff rate of in excess of 5%. Now, 5% doesn't seem a great deal.
Is that factual? I mean, that's not speculation.
The average WTO tariff rate across a range of services, I think BBC, if I may quote something that was on the BBC this morning, BBC Radio 4 this morning was quoting a figure of 5-point-something%. So, and I think that's looking at the range of tariffs that are there in the list that you can access online from the WTO's website. My point being that you could say, well, recent devaluation of the currency means that we don't have to worry about 5%. It's just 5% off, having already devalued by the best part of 20%. But I might say to you that 5% consistently applied also comes with paperwork. And the thing that really irritates businessmen is the need to do paperwork. The idea that trade gets slowed down by all that paperwork, and there's.
But it would be true to say, and I don't want to prolong the conversation unnecessarily, but it would be true to say that depending on which country you are still importing into, there is a certain element of paperwork that needs to be done for each individual country anyway.
Yeah, but bear in mind that, that one of the things that we got as a result of the Treaty of Maastricht, which I was trying to refer to as the early 90s treaty earlier on.
There you go, well done.
And the creation of the single market is that we went from, if you want to sell a pair of shoes that are manufactured in Northampton and sell them in Athens, there was a time when to get those shoes to the store in Athens, you had to have 26 bits of paper to go across all of the borders, assuming a land transition. These days you need one piece of paper. Now, for the exporter, that is a massive advantage. It saves such a lot of time in terms of administrative resource that you can use one sheet of paper. What are we going to do with that sheet of paper in the future? Are we going to create more paperwork for our exporters? Now, as I say, I'm not reopening...
But we are changing. I mean, the world has changed since that, and we've really got to bring it to a close shortly. But the world has changed. Electronic retailing across the world has changed.
Yes.
Amazon, for instance, can nearly do what you say. They are doing it. They are putting shipment outlets in different countries. They're actually going and taking the money in a central point in a different place. Yep. So distribution's from one part of it, the finances another part. And that model could nearly work elsewhere.
Well, their economic model works in terms of where they take the cash and getting the goods to from their warehouse. But you've got to get the goods to their warehouse first. And if that warehouse is sitting in Piraeus and the goods have to come from Northampton, they've still got to get across the borders, and you've still got to get the pair of shoes to them for Amazon to sell you the pair of shoes in the store in Piraeus or Athens or wherever it's going to be. I completely agree that digital trading and technology is going to transform. And I do actually think, if we're talking about technology, where it will very likely offer us a large part of the solution to the problem is in relation to Ireland. Where we are currently concerned about the reintroduction of hard borders and the impact on the Northern Irish peace process and the prosperity of both parts of Ireland, it is quite possible that technology will allow us to establish virtual borders in other places so that we can overcome that problem. But somebody has to negotiate it, and technology may be part of the answer.
I'm going to invite you back on the program again so we can rattle on like two empty vessels again for another hour and a bit. Actually, we have hopelessly overrun today. Yeah. I am going to ask you to, and this is your opportunity really to be as biased as you wish, but to give the key takeaways that you feel businesses, organisations, that we should all be aware of as we enter into this period of uncertainty. I mean, as you said, we're now coming to the end of the beginning, and now we're at the beginning of something that is going to be quite an adventure. It's going to be a roller coaster over the next couple of months. I'll tell you what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to. There I am. I'd like you to look straight down that camera there that our lovely cameraman is standing behind. And really, what if there are any?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just good thoughts and goodwill and to all men, but whatever the key takeaways are for the day would be really interesting. So say who you are and where you're from.
Okay. Well, I'm Stuart Miller, Managing Director of Warwick Legal Network, and it's my job to make sure that the law firms that I represent are able to help businesses do international trade. Here in Britain, that means inward investment into the UK, and it means acting for exporters who are looking to export their goods and services internationally. What I would like British companies and into the international audience viewing this program to do is put pressure on the European and British authorities to get recruiting the numbers of civil servants that we'll need for the negotiations to go as smoothly as possible, to reduce the scope of uncertainty for people who are living here, so that on both a commercial and a humanitarian level we can get beyond that issue that is bedeviling so many people's lives. I'd like us to think about how we're going to man the personnel requirements of specific industries here in the UK, such as our health service, our food industry, and the world of academia, where so many people come here to work from abroad, and we really have to have an answer to that question. and I'd like us to sort out the budget issues so that the discussion about the future and the transitional arrangements that I think are necessary can be done without further distraction. That would be my message.
And a succinct, as always, and straight to the point message. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the programme today.
Thank you.
I just felt we could have talked all afternoon.
Yeah.
We talked for an hour before the programme. We've talked for another hour and a quarter now, and we could probably talk for another couple of hours actually after the show completes. I hope you found today interesting. There is a lot to think about. Things we haven't touched, and we haven't touched on the how the patient is, how Europe is at the moment, because a lot of things going on there. We've got Le Pen, of course, in France. We've got what's just happened in Holland. Okay, it was, it didn't happen this time, but it could happen next time. We've got what's going on in Italy. We've got what's going on in Germany. Germany coming up. Looks like Angela won't be probably doing her stuff this time next year, I would imagine.
Well, she had a good, her party had a very good local election in the Saarland district just yesterday. So maybe the money is slightly coming back on Merkel for a fourth term.
And if she can't do it, then Tracy Ullman can do it for her instead as well. There's a very, very good impersonation. So we've got that. We've also got what's happening in Scotland, of course, and we kind of we alluded to that earlier on the programme. And the great Donald, of course, the other side of the Atlantic. What influence is he putting on the stability of the world's? If you want to find out, of course, what he's thinking, just go straight on the Twitter, because you'll get everything there. Listen, it's been a real insight. Thank you ever so much for coming on the program today. We look forward to doing it all again next week. Let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before we run out here, because we are hopelessly running over. On next week's programme, we talked to Nigel Risner. He's a motivational speaker. Now, we just got motivational speaker down on my piece of paper. What Nigel does, Nigel goes into businesses and he explains to businesses how you can grow your business. If you are a small business owner, I can only recommend that you watch next week's programme, because he will give you advice. He'll give you key things that you can do that you can realistically increase the bottom line. The first thing he says to everybody is just increase all your rates by 10%. They won't notice it, and I think somebody was saying an increase of 10% on the on your pricing will actually give you a 15% increase on your bottom line, something like that. He's on the program next week. That's Nigel Risner. He's called the Bulldog. When you watch the program next week, you'll find out why. Coming up on future programs. We've got the co-founder of Happen, that's Costas. He's going to be joining us here. Samantha Earle, General Manager, Perm Temps Driving Training. Dexter Moscow, Keynote Speaker, Business Coach. Deborah Hume, Manova Engagement. Ali Crump from the AA, Jackie Jarvis, Warren Knight, to name but a few. From all of us, have a great week. Bye for now. We'll catch you next week. Bye for now from Stuart and myself. Bye-bye.